Welcome to Vital Signs, your prescription for a healthy family, where members of the Catholic Medical Association explore medical topics vital to the health of you and your family members. I'm Dr. Tom McGovern, the host of Vital Signs, brought to you by Shalom World TV. Today we examine the number one addiction in the world. This insidious addiction leads to social isolation, causes traffic accidents, and breaks up families. And yet it's so common that most people don't even realize how dangerous it is. When Catholic philosopher and author Peter Kraft was asked what he thought was the most dangerous technological invention of all time, he answered, the smartphone. Because he said nearly everyone under the age of 30 is addicted to it, even more than to sex, drugs, or alcohol. In fact, about 2/3 of the world population demonstrates signs of smartphone addiction. In a typical day, the average user touches their phone over 2,600 times and unlocks it 150 times, spending nearly 3 hours on average with it, compared to less than 45 minutes daily with family members. Over 70% of users sleep with their smartphones, and about half never switch them off. 75% of users admit to texting while driving, which is more dangerous than drinking alcohol while driving. Smartphone use accounts for about 1/3 of parent-child conflicts, and half of parents are worried about the impact of smartphone addiction on their children's health, because long-term smartphone use does alter brain chemistry and contribute to childhood obesity. Joining us today is Dr. Larry Mitnaul, a child psychiatrist practicing at Ascension Health's Via Christi Clinic in Wichita, Kansas, where he lives with his wife and 5 children. Larry, welcome to Vital Signs.
Thank you, Tom, for having me. Excited to be with you.
So when we talk about addictions, most people think about drugs or alcohol. So how can we become addicted to activities that don't involve the intake of a harmful chemical?
So one of the things that may help people to recognize too that certain behaviors can have addictive patterns to them, and we can put them in that category of addiction. You can think about there's a gambling disorder in the DSM-5, so our Diagnostic and Statistical Manual in psychiatry, that talks about this continued craving and compulsion for people who get a thrill, and that in their brains kind of light up over the excitement and the chance at playing those things. And we see other behaviors too. So there's an internet gaming disorder diagnosis as well. And so when we look at human behavior, we can see we can look at food too as another really great example of behaviors that are natural behaviors or natural appetites of the human person that can be distorted to the point that they are sought after in excess of their right proportion in the lives of the daily, of our daily walk.
I like that phrase, right proportion. So many viewers might think we're exaggerating, that we're out of proportion by saying that adults and children get addicted to smartphones. So let's start with some basics. Would you describe the normal pathways used by the brain to help us learn and reinforce helpful habits?
Sure. So what's great is, we're built with a reward system that allows our brain to kind of experience, sometimes I'll describe it to young kids as the 4th of July, where dopamine kind of bursts and we get that affirmation of, you've accomplished a task. There are a couple other, hormones too that we're starting to learn about, dynorphin, and that also seem to be elevated in times of, attainment and mastery that help reinforce our drive to accomplish things and to make things and to build things and to seek out things that are exciting. And so that reward path, sometimes we try to, encourage that in kids, right? So the term for it in parents is bribery, when we're trying to induce a reward for the behavior or for the habit that we're trying to encourage and trying to see. And so we know that we can make those things, we can make some of those things stronger. When it comes to addictions, though, there can be things in the life of an individual that has that creates a heightened response, that's so desirous that they're willing to change their habits, maybe put things that are important to them in lower priority in order to accomplish them. And I think the most common examples that we think of are, illicit substances like cocaine or opiates or things like that generate a euphoric or a high and unnaturally a euphoric response that get people in this loop of kind of chasing after. Of course the downside is it's hard to keep engaging at that same level, for those same behaviors to present the same level of stimulus, the same level of feel good and reward. And so that elusive chase for more and more and more reward doesn't get met, and that can lead to a cycle of frustration. And we certainly see the same pattern with screens.
So when the brain is normally learning with its reward circuit, I've never heard it referred to as a bribery circuit before, but as a reward circuit, we don't develop tolerance or cravings. But those phrases are part of addiction language. So what are tolerance and cravings, and what role do they play in addictions?
Sure. So tolerance means, someone is experiencing a stimulus. So in this case, we're talking about screens. So there's something that they enjoy about watching a really, great movie or engaging in some form of social media. And so they're seeking that joy. But what happens is, maybe 20, 30 minutes was sufficient. The first, go around, and then the next time they want extended time to engage in those things. The elusive part is that those gains, that extra time spent kind of committed to that doesn't often get to the same reward state.
So let's talk specifically about the smartphone. What is it that it does to take advantage of our liking, our wanting, our reward pathways in ways that no longer serve us, but seek to master us?
Sure. I think probably the first is that it has such great PR, because the word smartphone actually reveals the thing we use it for the least, probably, which is talking to one another. And so built into this device, it's really, probably the more appropriate name is the, social media, gaming, and then occasional phone time device. And so it uses a lot of things kind of masterfully. One, the apps that you can add to it. So say games, for instance. And we know that a lot of the apps were created by, the same people who create, the slot machines in Vegas, that they get really good at things that capture our mind, that titillate those parts of our brain that really want us to do more. Most of our apps, even the ones that are good for us, have done a good job of also offering many reminders throughout the day. So things that you otherwise would have been able to pick up at a later time, it's reminding you haven't checked me in 15 or 20 minutes, or you haven't earned, this many points, or did you know you have 10 more, pressing emails that you've yet responded to. And so what does that mean? That means that our attention and focus throughout the day is constantly at war, actually, with this thing that we have in our pocket that's constantly beckoning us to, take another look or answer something new, or to engage in something that might be more interesting than the thing that we're encountering in the moment.
I've heard that the way that the smartphone notifies us with pings at unpredictable and irregular intervals is particularly powerful in affecting the brain. Is that true?
That is true. It actually is a perfect modern day analog to the Pavlovian experiment, in which you give a dog food and a bell, right? And so you give these two things together. A dog in the wild is not conditioned to respond to a bell, right? As a means of noting that there's going to be a meal and something good to consume. But you could, Pavlov was able to take away the meat and then ring the bell, and the dog's salivary glands would start, salivating with the expectation that food is around the corner. And so I'm sure that anyone watching today has had this experience where maybe you're at mass or you're at an event and you hear a ring that sounds like yours, or that reminds you of one of the reminders on your phone, and instantaneously your brain has been transported, even if for a few seconds or a few minutes, to what are the concerns that are pressing? Could that be something important that I need to attend to? And so, in many ways, those same conditioning principles that B.F. Skinner and early psychologists have studied have really been masterfully placed together in one device. And it's no wonder that our brains kind of respond in that way.
And so what is so darn attractive about the smartphone that it even draws us away from the very people or the beauty of nature that's right in front of us?
Sure. I think there are kind of a couple of circuits that are probably bound up in that. One, in terms of easy reward. The analogy that I'll use is a child who has, all the toys in the world, right? Their room is saturated with it. Their playroom is saturated with it, right? The floor is covered with them. What toy does that child want to play with? None of them, actually. I mean, there is a saturation point at which the individual things cease to be interesting anymore, right? The race car that they really pined for all this time, it has lowered in terms of its, I'm going to use the term appetitive drive, but that thing that you're kind of craving and hungry for, that signal is diminished because it's diluted by all of these other things. And so often I'll work with teenagers who, when I ask them why they haven't gotten their driver's license, or why they're not part of clubs, or why they're not interested in going out to the movies, they simply say to me, I actually don't even want those things. I don't desire those things. And part of it is because they have this ubiquitous access to, pleasure, entertainment, and connection, which I would argue is superficial connection, that draws away from the richness of the created world.
So we talked about tolerance as a sign of addiction. What you've described, is that related to tolerance, or does tolerance look different with smartphone addiction?
Yeah, it certainly is. It has some similarities and then some differences. I think one of the things that are similar is the increasing time. And so what we notice is that kids who get their cell phone at 12 or prior to the age of 12, in terms of the average length of time spent connected to a screen of any type, and that would be television or iPad or whatnot, is considerably higher than their peers who are adopting it for the first time at the age of 13, 14, or even later. And so what you'll find is in terms of the average daily uses for those kids who have been doing it longer, they stay on it longer. Their time spent on it is more enduring. And again, perhaps not surprising, we actually see correlations in terms of defiant, oppositional, and irritability in those kids as well. There was one great study called the ABCD study that looked at a cohort of kids and found that for every additional hour, there was a 10% decrease in happiness, easygoing kind of affect and temperament with the amount of time spent on the device.
That's a great description of tolerance. So then what does craving look like? How might parents recognize craving in a child with a smartphone?
Right. So often in my office, I have it easy. When I'm talking to kids about reconfiguring their life and finding the fun things to do, I ask them, okay, for our first trip, why don't we put the cell phone on pause, or you hand it to your parents and just do without it. And that's, the only things that I am guaranteed to draw tears is talking about trauma or asking for a cell phone removal. Those are the only two things. And so you'll get to see that attachment or that craving for the phone is so strong. Often I see the way that kids are carrying it. It's almost like the doll or the blanket that you would have seen kind of younger kids carrying. I think it's not uncommon to see maybe kids in the library or at the store as they're going out more and more these days, really kind of clutching it as you would, a puppy or a baby. The other is in terms of waking up and going to sleep. So most kids and adults even will find themselves kind of glued to their phone. And I remember my first Samsung, the background screen said Life Companion. And the first day I wake up with the phone in my bed, I think, oh no, I've done it. I've overstepped the boundary. Now it's time to reinstate some really good habits that you're not also going to sleep and awaking with the phone. So most kids, if they're missing their books, if they're missing their backpack, If they're missing their mask, they're okay. If they're missing the phone, that tends to bring about a really significant regression, sometimes tantrum, irritability, and a disorientation. And I think those are some of the things that help us to recognize this is an addiction, an unhealthy connection.
Well, that's a great segue into what I want to ask about an examination of conscience regarding smartphone use. Besides what you've mentioned, are there any other keys that parents ourselves or our children that we're observing might be signs that, you know what, this is an addiction?
Yes. The first is in terms of, I would want every parent to be aware of their child's curious questions. I think as we go through life, often our kids are encountering things that are interesting and wondrous in the world. And if you find that 9 times out of 10, your young child, and I'm thinking here, younger than 12, 13, if their immediate response is to go to Google before turning their attention towards you, that is a sign of concern in terms of attachment and orientation. That one of the things that the smartphone is supplanting is the person of influence and knowledge in their lives. So if that's a habit that parents are seeing, I think that's one. The other is often I will describe young people or even adults or adult kids who might be living at home as a cave. So if you find that they are retreating to the cave and it's becoming a chore to pull them into organic family life, whether at the dinner table or just throwing the frisbee around or playing basketball, that those are signs too that their connection to these things are that they're settling for something less than the fullness of life that they could otherwise be experiencing.
That's a great answer. It's been widely reported that high-tech innovators like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs radically limited their own children's screen time and didn't even allow them smartphones until they were at least 14 years old. So they knew something that many of us don't know. What does healthy smartphone use look like then?
Yes. So there isn't a randomized controlled trial for, best time to introduce a cell phone. So, but I would say this, that I think parents who are trying their best to delay, or at the time that you think is most appropriate. And so, introducing the cell phone. So one, I think, is asking the question, what is our intention around this? So if we are intending for our child to have a device to connect with us and to let us know their location and that sort of thing, okay, there might be simpler ways to do that don't also come with all of these other potential distractors or things that you're going to have to limit and put parental controls around. Also, I think as a family, decide what the technology use kind of schedule and amount should be for your family, and stick to it. And don't be afraid to be the odd parent whose child tells you no one else does it this way, and you're the only ones, setting these limits and expectations. Every family is different. You're not going to cause, trauma to your child by not having access to TikTok or Snapchat. And so I think we want to equip our children as best as possible. So I think having very clear limits, both for parents and for children, and also making sure and monitoring kind of the time that they do spend on that.
That sounds good. We found that turning off the phone at night and putting it away from the bedroom was a first step that helped us. Now, silence. How important are periods of silence for not only brain health, but combating screen addiction?
Sure. I think they're actually crucial. And so I'll give you a couple of vignettes that have proven this to my mind, and the evidence is I think coming to bear this out. So one of the ways sometimes kids are struggling or adults are struggling so mightily with their emotional lives and the things that they're encountering that they might require hospitalization. Well, one of the things that often hospitalization affords is pause on all of those other superficial connections or distractions in our lives. And I think that's actually one of the therapeutic ways in which people are able to be more grounded and more connected to themselves. That it really is hard to find moments of silence unless you're making those intentionally. The other thing is that often this hunger for being connected and seeing the newest show or the latest thing also decreases the child's appetite too for the fun things that they otherwise would enjoy. And so often when I see kids engaging in what I call an electronic fast, all of a sudden the Casio keyboard they got 2 Christmases ago comes out. The piano that's sitting in the living room is getting played. The ukulele that's been collecting dust come back into focus. I had one child actually come back, and he started a business in his community, pet sitting. Again, but it required silence. It required boredom for his mind to entertain those things in order to open that door to allow him to find the things that really kind of stimulate his mind and his body. So I think silence is a crucial part of this.
So do you have recommendations for how much time each day a child should use a phone, or how much time it should be turned off, that they should fast from it?
Sure. I think certainly, I hate cell phones around bedtime. So I go with the general guidances from the American Academy of Pediatrics and ACAP for kids to have at least an hour or two before they're winding down to have all screens off, and that they're allowed to, their bodies to just kind of relax and to not misperceive the light that they get from, these artificial devices to really distort their sleep patterns and habits. I think for kids, who are younger than middle school age, who probably aren't doing a lot of activities that require independence and as much kind of coordination, I'm okay with families living life closer to Little House on the Prairie and being a little less kind of digitally connected, except as needed. And so, even in my own house, I mean, if my child is going for a trip, and maybe a field trip with friends, okay, I mean, the 12-year-old might get the phone, to be able to coordinate the rides and things like that. But in terms of just passive use of the phone daily, or the expectation of that, it's very very limited. And I think for our teens, we want to start introducing kind of proportionate use. And so here I think I offer that up to parents to use their best prudential judgment. So think about the amount of time or how many hours that you have in the evening once your child comes back from school. Carve out how much time that you want spent with kind of family connectedness, and then subtract out the 2 hours or hour before going to bed. And then you're probably left with the amount of time after homework and things like that are a reasonable bulwark for how much time to offer to teens.
Larry, thank you so much. This was full of practical pearls of wisdom that we can use with ourselves and our children, so that smartphones are our servants instead of our masters.
Thank you. It really has been an honor speaking with you, Tom, and I love the work that you're doing. So thank you for having me.
And thank you to our viewers for watching this episode of Vital Signs, your prescription for a healthy family, brought to you by Shalom World TV and the Catholic Medical Association, where we are inspiring physicians to imitate Jesus Christ. Please join us for our next episode and share the good news of Vital Signs with a friend, and may God bless you. I encourage everyone to send us emails with questions that you want to ask medical experts. Please email us at vitalsigns@shalomworld.org. Your questions and comments will help us determine what topics we'll cover in the next season of Vital Signs.
Are you searching for answers? Discover your true identity. Stay tuned to Shalom World.